Well, good afternoon, everybody. And I'm here with the number one grandpa in the world. Thank you for coming, Tim. I'm just going to laud over you just a bit and then give you a chance to speak. Tim Rasinski is a professor of literacy at Kent State. He's director of its award reading clinic, written over 200 articles, co-authored or edited over 50 books, research being cited by everybody, including the National Reading Panel. The first author of the Fluency chapter on Handbook of Reading Research, co-editor of the Reading Teacher and Journal of Literacy Research, and the coup de grace, elected to the International Reading Hall of Fame in 2010. So wow. And Tim has been an incredibly good friend of St. Louis and our literacy folks here. And I'm going to be quiet and let you start talking. Tim, go for it.
Hi, Sam. Thanks for having me. I know you're kind of famous for wearing your hat, so I thought I'd wear my hat.
I love, but you know, I'm going on Amazon like in minutes and finding out how to make one of those.
This was my Father's Day gift last year. My wife and I found, well, we have our third grandson who was born in November.
Wow. Congratulations.
And yeah, that's the good part. The sad part is we haven't seen him yet.
Oh,
he lives in Oklahoma with his our son and daughter-in-law, and of course we can't travel because of this pandemic. So we're hoping to get our shots and hit the road. To see, introduce ourselves to Ryan Nicholas Rasinski.
Okay.
So glad to have you. Glad to be here with you. I think you asked me to talk a little bit about myself, so give you a little background about me.
Sure.
So, okay. Well, I don't want to start all the way back in 1950 when I was born. I'll just start when I graduated from college. Actually, my undergraduate degree was in economics, and I graduated. I was ROTC at the time, and so spent my several years in the service. When I got out, though, I had the GI Bill ahead of me, and I had friends who would encourage me to think about becoming a teacher, and I tried to go against that because I have family members who were teachers and I knew how hard they worked. I didn't want to work that hard. But nevertheless, I jumped in and found a life's work out of it. First of all, became a elementary teacher outside of Omaha, Nebraska, and eventually became a Title I teacher, an interventionist. And that got me interested in kids who were struggling. And so I just went on the long haul. I got a master's degree, and I love to tell the story about the power of a teacher. I was working on my master's degree, and I did a paper, and I had a professor. His name was Donald Cushenberry, University of Nebraska at Omaha. He looked at my paper. He brought me into his office, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble. But he said, Tim, do you ever think this is a pretty good paper? Do you ever think about getting a doctorate? And of course, no, I thought that master's is about how high I could possibly go. But he planted the seed in me, and it really shows, the power of a teacher, what we can do by influencing, providing some confidence in some of our students. That got me going, and went to Ohio State, got my PhD there. I taught at the University of Georgia. Came back to Kent State. It's been now 32 years. I've been married 45 years here. I've been thinking about that. I've got a wonderful wife, Kathy. We have 4 kids. They live pretty much all around the country. Our son, Mike, is in the service. He is in Oklahoma, soon to move to Germany. He's being transferred there. We have a daughter, Emily, who works in Washington, D.C. for the government. Our youngest daughter, Jennifer, lives in your neck of the woods in St. Louis. She's a speech therapist.
We love having her here.
Yeah, and it gives us good reason to come out to St. Louis whenever we can. She's expecting too, so we have a granddaughter on the way with Jenny. And then our middle daughter, Mary, was a fashion designer, lived in New York for several years and caught the bug of teaching, much like I did, I guess. And she just got her master's degree in early childhood, so she'll be teaching come this fall there. So we got quite a diverse family, and I think we've been just trying to struggle along with everybody else with this pandemic there. And I've been working at my new office, which is my dining room table you're looking at, right?
I have a similar kind of thing.
Yeah,
Last
me
year
too.
this time, if you'd said Zoom, I would have looked at you funny, like, what?
Ah,
And now
isn't
here
that
we go.
yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
well, I think that's a good segue into the first question. And the first question is, whoa, the first question is on the next page.
Uh-oh.
Here we go. Scripts. Yes. Why does fluency seem to be such a difficult to understand reading competency? And I know you are the king of fluency. So,
Well, yeah, that's area I've spent a good part of my career in, and that's a great question, because fluency, I still remember Dick Allington's piece almost 40 years ago, Fluency, the neglected reading goal. He talked about how fluency is important, but it doesn't seem to be show up on any curricular maps here. And why is that? And I would argue that to some extent it's still not, although the National Reading Panel said it's important. I think of all those 5 competencies, phonics, fluency, phonemic awareness, vocabulary and comprehension, fluency is probably the one that's got the least attention. And I think there's several reasons why. First, I would call it the measurement problem. The way we've learned to measure reading fluency, or one aspect of fluency, is by speed of reading. If anybody ever does, those of you who are doing Ames Web or Dibbles or any of these different methods of assessing automaticity, know that we have kids read for a minute and we count the number of words they read correctly, we compare it against the norm, which is fine. It's a great measure of automatic word recognition. The problem, though, becomes when we flip that and we turn speed into the goal. For example, and this is, well-meaning teachers all around the country, and I probably would do it myself, is, okay, I get it. I want to raise my kids' reading speed, so we'll get out the stopwatch and we'll have kids read for a minute 3 or 4 times and try to increase their reading speed. Kids get the idea it's all about reading fast, and they become fast readers, but they don't become very better comprehenders at all. So that's one of the problems. I tell teachers that I work with, we want kids to become fast readers, but we want them to become fast the way all of us became fast, which is how we just read a lot. And we developed automatic word recognition, and 2 things happened. Number 1, we read faster. Number 2, we read with better comprehension, because automaticity opens up the gates for comprehension. Another problem with fluency, or the way we interpret it, is that it's more than one thing too. We often think of it as this automaticity notion, this thing that we measure by speed of reading, but there's also this thing called prosody, or expressiveness. If I think about somebody who's a fluent speaker or fluent reader, it's not somebody who talks or reads fast, it's somebody who uses their voice to make meaning. They get loud and soft and fast and slow, dramatic pauses. And that's the other part. What we know from the research is those students who, when they read orally, read with good expression and good phrasing and all those things we associate with prosody, when they read silently, they tend to be our best comprehenders. But again, how often do we talk about that with our students? We're doing a better job, but I think we can spend a lot more time talking about this issue of prosody, even with our struggling, even with our in silent reading. Because most people would argue that even when we read silently, we hear ourselves. There's that internal voice, and we need to modulate that as well. And then the third problem is we often associate fluency only with oral reading. And of course, past 2nd grade or so, we start saying, well, we got to be focusing on silent reading. And that's true, but there's definitely a place for oral reading in our classrooms. And I think I'd have to agree with Tim Shanahan, who's spoken about this many times, about the value of oral reading, and especially find authentic reasons for oral reading. For me, that things like performance. If you're going to be in a play, you're going to have to read orally, right? Or if you're going to recite a poem or sing a song or recite a speech from American history, all those require oral reading. They're not done silently. So those are authentic versions of using oral reading there. So kind of a long-winded answer to your question there, but all those things, the fact that we tend to go focus on oral over silent, the focus on measurement, speed of reading, and the recognition that there's also this thing called prosody, all make fluency a little bit more complicated than we might think it ought to be. So there's my answer. I hope you're editing all my oohs and ahs out of this.
Well, and you, long ago, you visited St. Louis many times, and you turned me into a believer for sure. my kids all now know that they're supposed to read like storytellers, and the teachers that I'm working with still know that that's one of the major goals that we have. And the
Yeah.
repeated reading, we're doing that. And by the way, thank you for coming out to my school that day. That was just amazing. But
It was a fun
so
trip.
we totally are into that. And I'll put a plug in for a couple of your materials, including the mega book of fluency, and your book of I found a book of poetry that you put together a while back, and you're out on the internet giving all those things away for oral reading things. So read. All right, the next question. Is there one instructional strategy you would recommend for teaching or promoting fluency?
One instruction, that's a great question. Actually, I'm going to answer that by saying two. There's two I would recommend.
Oh, okay.
How do we develop fluency? First, I would call it assisted reading. Assisted reading is where a student who is a developing reader reads something, and simultaneously they hear it being read to them by somebody else, somebody who's a more fluent reader. That could be a partner, it could be reading with a group, it could be reading and listening to a pre-recorded version of that same text. But we know from the research on this, Keith Topping's work is really pretty convincing that when kids do this regularly, he trained parents to sit side by side with their children for 10 minutes a night, read out loud together the same text. The children accelerated their progress in reading by a factor of 3 to 5. I mean, let me explain what that means. Suppose you had a student who was making a half month's progress for months worth of school. They would start to do assisted reading with a partner for 10 minutes a night. And now they're making 1.5 to 2.5 months progress for every month's worth of school. And it wasn't simply becoming more fluent, they're becoming better comprehenders at the same time. So that assisted reading certainly is one of them. And then the other one is repeated reading. You just mentioned that earlier in your comment, where we ask kids to read something not once, twice, but 3 or 4 times until they reach a point where they can read that text as well as a proficient reader. It was Dr. J. Samuel's research back in 1979. Hard to believe it's that been long ago. But what he found was that when students read something 2, 3, 4 times, of course they got better on the piece they practiced. But when they went on to a brand new piece they've never seen before, sometimes in some cases even more difficult than the one they just read, there were still vestiges of improvement on that new piece. So that's the beauty of repeated readings. It's reading something and getting better at it, but it's the carryover effect, the transfer, that's real learning. Now, what I like about mentioning those two things is you can put them together. You can create an integrated lesson. Say, for example, you had a student, you gave them a text to read. The first time they read it, maybe they heard the teacher read it to them, okay, and they were following along silently. Then they read it together with the teacher or a parent or a classmate together. And then after that, then they practiced it on their own and perhaps performed it for their classmates or for their teacher. So they're getting the repeated readings, they're getting the assisted reading all at the same time. And what the research shows on this is that it's a pretty powerful tool. We created a lesson called the Fluency Development Lesson. We actually use it in our reading clinic, and we've gotten some remarkable results. We're finding kids making a year's progress in reading as little as 4 or 5 weeks' time. Doesn't always happen that way, but there always seems to be quite remarkable progress. Now, the key to repeated reading, by the way, is why would you ever ask the question, why would you ever want to get kids to read something repeatedly, right? Sam, I'd like for you to read this 7 times. Tell me when you're done, okay? And I think you'd probably roll your eyes. Yeah, right.
No, I don't.
It's a reason. Yeah, an authentic reason. I love John Dewey's quote, who said, what we should be asking kids to do in school should reflect the things we do in real life. Okay, so where in real life do we actually rehearse? That's another name for repeated readings. And of course, the answer is if you're going to perform, right? These questions that we're bouncing back and forth about, I've been thinking about them for about the last 2 or 3 hours, trying to rehearse for myself. Well, are there texts that are meant to be performed then? Yeah, of course. You got poetry, songs, readers' theater scripts, speeches, dialogues, monologues. There's all kinds of stuff. And this is the kind of material that if you think about it, if you're around my age, we used to do this all the time. We don't do it as much anymore. I think we need to maybe sometimes look back to where we're at before we move on to something new, and maybe bring back these kinds of texts, because in many cases they're joyful, they're fun, they're interactive, they're meant to be read with expression. They demand to be read with expression, so they're perfect for developing not only the automaticity part of reading fluency, but also the prosody part there. So assisted reading, repeated reading, put them together, then you got synergy, something even greater than the sum of the parts.
Okay, I'm going to quickly hit you with an off-the-books question, a follow-up question to that, and partly because I know you've got that megabit fluency floating around. I work with young kids, like second and third graders, but I know that is this technique usable for older readers, and what kind of resources?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. We did some work several years ago, my colleague Nancy Paddock and some graduate students with high school kids. And we found there's a substantial number of high school readers who are still not sufficiently fluent. If you were simply to measure their reading rate, they're about a half of where they should be, according to some of the norms out there. So it is a problem for older kids, and it results in poor comprehension. The key, you can still do repeated readings. You can still do the assisted reading. You just got to find texts that are more appropriate. For example, how about having older kids, middle schoolers, high schoolers, read material, practice and perform poetry by Langston Hughes, by Robert Frost, by Emily Dickinson. How about Robert Service? Do you know Robert Service's work? He's a poet, a Scottish poet,
Yes.
Lived in Canada. The cremation of Sam McGee. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The northern lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was that night on the marge of Lake Labarge. I cremated Sam McGee. It goes on. I mean, tell me a middle school kid who doesn't like the notion of cremation there. But you find the most appropriate material. The best example of this was just a few weeks ago at the inauguration. Amanda Gorman recited that poem. That not only she wrote it, and which of course is the next thing. Kids can start writing their own poetry, their own scripts, practice and perform them. But then to see her perform that with such great fluency, such her whole body was into it, and of course the meaning became clear. Not only the words, but it was the way she performed that. So certainly that's a great example of that. I did an interesting study, by the way, if I can move on, talk about older students. I did this with a colleague of mine. We asked, talk about speeches. So we found speeches by famous Americans. John F. Kennedy's speeches for his inaugural address. You have nothing. What did he say? Ask not what your country can do for you, right?
Right.
Dr. King's "I Have a Dream" speech, right? Well, we subjected those speeches. We had recordings of them, so we subjected them to a Dibbles analysis. We simply counted the number of words they read correctly in a minute's time, and if you were to only use that as your measure, both of those speeches would have been indicated as disfluent. They were reading at about, I think it was maybe a fourth or fifth grade level. Well, nobody would claim that Dr. King's speech or JFK's speech were disfluent. They actually read slower on purpose to convey meaning there. So it's a nice example of the fact that it's not speed, it's meaning that you're trying to convey. And sometimes that meaning requires you to slow down a little bit in your reading of the text. But we had a lot of fun with that one.
A ton to think about there. Your next question. You're really big into word study, especially word roots, and you're giving us things like that Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. You're giving us all kinds of materials on your Twitter account. But can you tell me more about word study and word roots?
Sure. Yeah, my Twitter feed, by the way, self-promotion, at Tim Rasinski.
Okay, it'll be in the blog.
All right. If you're going to talk about fluency, you have to talk about the foundation of fluency, which is words. You have to be Kids have to have large vocabularies. They have to be able to decode words accurately. And of course, that's been an interest of mine as well. This notion of word roots actually goes back to my high school years. I took Latin in high school. And I think anybody who's taken Latin would notice this. I began to notice that many of the words I was reading in Latin look a whole lot like English words, like urb, URB is Latin for city, and of course, oh yeah, I urban renewal, suburban, interurban, and so on and so forth. Words like that, and so yeah, I've always had that recognition about the importance of Latin, but I wasn't that deeply ingrained in me. I didn't study it that deeply. Fortunately for me, I met some scholars here at Kent State, Rick and Evangeline Newton. Rick used to be the chair of the classics department at Kent State. He knows Latin and Greek inside and out. And we should start playing around developing a program. But the point we want to make here is that, when we teach kids word families like AT and ING and ACK, if you know that ACK says ack, you can figure out words like back, track, stack, tack, lack, and so many other words as well. Well, it's the same thing with these word roots. If you know one of these word roots, you can figure out lots and lots of other words in English. Most of these word roots, by the way, are derived from Latin and Greek here. But they're even better than the word families because they also have meaning to them. So for example, the one I often use is track, T-R-A-C, T-R-A-C-T, track or tract, which means to drag, pull, or draw. Okay, so if you know that root, then all we have to do is throw in a tractor. For example, what does a tractor pull? Farm implements. When you have traction on your tires on a snowy day like we have here in Ohio, it's the drag on your tires that keeps you on the road. It's when your muscles contract, what happens? They pull together. When students are easily distracted, they're pulled away from our attention. I mean, I can go on for this for a long time. Abstract art, pulled from reality. Vanilla extract, pulled from the essence of the vanilla bean. The point is, we teach one root to our students. We've given them a tool for figuring out 10, 20, 30, in some cases, over 100 words in English. And a bonus of that is that many of these roots find their way into academic vocabulary. We talk about how our reading scores have not increased much over the last 27 years. Well, the same thing is true with our students' social studies and geography scores. Their learning there has been stagnant as well. Well, one way of improving that would be to help build vocabulary in these areas. And if we know these roots find their way into social studies, then let's teach them. Let's teach all these roots as well. So there's so many bonuses there. Great crossover into Spanish. When we have our ELL students, I can read not terribly well, but reasonably well Spanish, and it's because of my knowledge of Latin and Greek roots. Well, if it can be a bridge from English to Spanish, it can go the other direction as well for our students, Spanish to English. And we've actually found that to be the case. So I just think there's so much potential. The problem is most people are like me. Yeah, maybe I've had a little dabbling in Latin in high school, but that's about it. I don't know that much. I need to learn more. So my colleagues and I, as I mentioned, Rick and Evangeline Newton, along with Nancy Paddock, we've been trying to develop some professional development material, some curricular material that can bring it into the classrooms for 10 minutes a day and can make I think make a huge difference for many of our students. I want them to become, by the way, lexophiles. You know what a lexophile is?
No.
Okay, well, I'll tell you. Lex, L-E-X or L-E-C means words, okay, like in lecture, lectern, dyslexia, right? Okay, and phile, P-H-I-L-E, means love, as in philosophers love wisdom, philanthropists love people, bibliophiles love books. So if you're a lexophile, you love words. So we want kids to become word lovers too.
And you just saw light come on over on this side of things. Did you notice the great brightness? Amazing. Okay, I won't miss a chance to plug for you the fact that and your website will be in the blog, and I can kick into that to get both the commercial materials that are available and also all those free things you have and those free things you post every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for us.
Right.
So we and teachers are just my teachers at my building. They look forward to those.
Well, it was my duty, or what I wanted to do, something that could contribute to helping everybody out during this pandemic. So we started this back in March, and it's actually been a joy for me. I've actually got my daughters helping me out there with this thing. But speaking of these word roots, every Monday is Monday morphology. So we try to focus on a morpheme of the week. So this week was World Reading Day, Read Aloud Day. So the root that on Monday was the root for read, the Latin root for read, onim, nim, and onim. And we talked about all the words that are derived from that have that with English words that have that within them.
Okay, well, speaking of popular things, word ladders. My kids buy for them. The teachers love them. It's a word game. Are they really meaning anything?
Yeah. Word ladders. That's an interesting one that came up. It was I like playing word games, by the way, as many people do. I play words with friends, and when we get together with my family, we get out the Scrabble, Boggle, Balderdash, Wheel of Fortune. And it dawned on me one day that, if you and I like to play games, and so many of the games we play are word games, why would kids? Well, of course. Well, why don't we make word study feel like a game for our kids? And so this word ladder was developed actually out of the work of Isabel Beck and Charles Perfetti at University of Pittsburgh. They did some work on this. Pat Cunningham, I got to acknowledge, she's did some work with it. And all I did was I do what all teachers do. You take somebody else's idea and you tweak it. You change it a little bit. And for me, what happens is when I make a word, it's you guide students from going from one word to the next, and you change one letter, one sound at a time, either adding a letter, subtracting a letter, changing a letter. And the first and last words go together in some way to make it a little bit of a game. And it is, they really have been taken off here. In fact, let's try one now. I was going to do it, and I forgot to do it, but let's see if I can do it right now here. We'll do it in our head, okay?
Okay.
Okay, let's start with my name, Tim. Okay, Tim. Okay, I'm going to give it to you. Okay, Sam, let's change one letter in Tim and make another word for a gratuity. When you go to the restaurant.
Well, if I change that last letter,
okay,
would it be tip?
It's a tip, right? I could have given you a tip on that one. Okay, let's see where we can go with this. Okay, let's change a letter in tip and make when you take a tiny drinks out of something, you're taking what? Not a gulp, but a what? Change the first letter.
Sip.
Sip, very good. Okay, now this time we're going to change the vowel and change the vowel in sip and make a gooey substance that comes out of trees in the springtime. Here in Ohio, we have a lot of maple trees, so we get a lot of maple.
I love maple sap.
Oh yeah, especially when it gets turned into maple syrup. Right? Yeah. Okay, here's the last one. Change the last letter in sap to make the guy I'm talking to right now. Last letter.
Oh my gosh. Okay, we're going to have to put capital there.
Yeah, there you go. Capitalize it. So we started with Tim. We ended with Sam.
Oh, right.
Yeah, they're not that hard to do, to be honest with you.
You just blow mine. How do you?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was an easy one to do. But what's neat about this is I know a lot of teachers have kids do it independently, which is fine. But I love doing this with kids because what you can do then is engage them in conversation, like you were just doing. You had to change, capitalize the first letter, that sort of thing. Draw attention to where the sound changes. And what Isabel Beck's research found that kids who did this on a regular basis improved phonological awareness, improved word decoding, and improved reading comprehension all at the same time. So it's a fun thing to do. And I enjoy doing them quite a bit, and that's on my Twitter feed. That's Word Ladder Wednesday. So I'm big into alliteration. So morphology Monday, Word Ladder Wednesday, and fluency Friday.
Well, and I'll tell you that I've zoomed into second grade every Tuesday, and this is just part of what I do. I always put word letters in this class on Zoom, and I can do all that. It's just wonderful.
That's cool. Yeah, it's
Okay,
that, and that's what's neat is that these things can be done over virtual environments. That you don't have to always be in person. Kids, and it's neat to see kids being engaged. I got a Twitter note from somebody a few months ago, and she was telling me how much she loved them, but she said she really likes them for her 80-plus-year-old mother. She loves to do them. Her mother loved to do crosswords, but she's gotten to the point where those become too difficult for her. So now she's doing these word letters with her mother, which I said, wow, that's great. What's good for younger kids is good for older kids as well.
Teachers find a way, don't they?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, last question here, and this is probably the question of the century. You've written about the art of teaching reading, and what do you mean by that? And why is it important?
Yeah, the art of teaching reading. I have been writing quite a bit. We had an article published last September in Literacy Today, and then just recently we got word that another more researchy article on the art of teaching reading is going to be published in Reading Research Quarterly. So we're really looking forward to that. Yeah, it's really hard to get a paper published in there. So 40 years in business, I think this is my second one. So it's pretty cool. Well, we've been talking about the science of teaching reading, and that's really an important conversation to have. And teaching reading is a science. I'm not going to deny that at all. We have to teach those basic competencies that the National Reading Panel talked about. We have to make sure that phonics is part of that. But it's not just a science. And see, that's what I see. It seems like we're kind of narrowing our focus and saying everything has to be viewed through the lens of science and science only. And I don't think that's the case. It also has to be an art. The best teacher, and this is why teaching is so hard. You have to be an artist and a scientist. You can't be one, you can't be the other. You got to be both if you want to be a good teacher. Art, the word art itself is derived from, I think, a Greek word that means to arrange. And so, the way I see it is, okay, I got to teach phonics, but how do I teach it? How do I arrange my curriculum so that I can teach this critical competency? Same thing with reading fluency, same thing with comprehension. Do it in authentic, artful sorts of ways there. Give quite an example with the fluency thing. I mentioned how repeated readings is such a scientific concept, pretty well validated. But having kids read something for the purpose of reading fast really isn't terribly artful, and I don't think it's terribly effective in the long run. But if we take that notion of why would anybody want to rehearse, then you get into the art of it, where you have kids practicing and performing poetry, scripts, and so on. Same thing with word study, where you have kids. Oh, by the way, what I love with the fluency stuff is after kids perform scripts, guess what? They can write their own. What would happen if they took a frog and toad story and turned it into a script and then performed it? They're going to have to add things. They're going to have add some narration to it. I have a friend by the name of Chase Young. He was a second grade teacher. Now he's a college professor. But that's what his students did all the time. They would read a story, and then he would work with them to turn it into a script. And then they would perform it. These kids got to be stars there. That's the art. Repeated reading in authentic ways. Same thing with word study, where these word ladders we just did. Well, again, that's a game. That's something very authentic to us as human beings. Then why not do it with kids? But again, the next step is have kids make it. They're not that hard to do, and once kids get the hang of it, they can make their own word ladders. In fact, I have examples of that. Or how about having kids write poetry and perform their own poetry? That's the art of doing the science. You're doing both. You're getting both there. One of the things I love about one of the words often associated with art is creativity. It's at the highest level of Bloom's taxonomy, when kids can, well, any of us can take what we know and use that as a basis for creating something. Well, kids can create their own scripts, they can write their own poetry, they can make their own word ladders. One of my favorites, though, is when kids can they can make up their own words. I call it being the bard. William Shakespeare invented words. About 10% of all the words he invented are of his own. He made up all the 10% of all the words he ever used. He made up himself. Words like lackluster and premeditated, bedroom. Well, if he can do it, why can't kids? And if they know their word roots, they can do that, make up their own words. Example of a Shakespeare word is bedroom. He took bed, room, put it together, bedroom, place where a person sleeps. Well, kids can do exactly the same thing. And we encourage that, kids to do that. One of my favorites is this one here. Let's see if you can figure this one out. Matermand, Matermand.
Okay.
Okay, Matermand. You know what mater means, right?
Oh, now I'm going to be embarrassed.
Matrimony, maternal. It means mom, mother.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I know you got the pressure on. Don't worry about it.
Freeze.
Okay.
I'll attribute it to brain freeze.
Happens to me all the time. We're similar in age, and believe me, it's it's all of us. Anyways, okay, so it means mother, right? Okay, mand. A lot of people may not know that one, but you find that in words like command, demand, remand, reprimand, mandate, mandatory. It's an order. So matermand is a mother's order. When I talk with teachers, I say, you ladies out there, go tell your kids to clean their room. What do they say? Kids come back, why? Why do I have to? And your answer is an easy one. It's a matermand. It requires no explanation. Just do it. That word was invented by, I believe it was a fourth grader in our reading clinic. Again, being creative, being artful, not only as teachers, but encouraging kids to be artful as well. So that's what I mean. And I think when we do that, we're going to begin to get closer to that vision that John Dewey had, where schools should be, an embryonic society. They should be reflections of real life, or reflections of the ideal society that we would like to live in. That's the art. And I'm not dismissing the science. Absolutely, we need the science, but we need to find a way of blending them together. Dare I say, balanced reading curriculum? I know that seems to be a negative term nowadays, but I think it really does need to be both. Absolutely, and that's really the challenge for all of us as teachers, is to help them make it that way.
Well, I think I certainly want to thank you for all these wonderful ideas. I have an idea. Next Monday, there's going to be some kids writing some things, and all kinds of wonderful things coming from this. And I'll put a final plug in. All the things. There'll be links to everything. In the blog.
Okay.
So, final thoughts.
Final thoughts. No, well, see, now I'm at a brain freeze here. I often end with my presentations with a poem that I usually try to find inspiring. So I'll end with a poem. One of my all-time favorites. It's attributed to Ralph Waldo Emerson, the great American philosopher, and it's called Success. And what I want to do, first of all, let me thank you for having me on your program here.
My honor.
Oh, and by the way, when my daughter in St. Louis has her baby, hopefully in a month or so, let's make sure that we can go out for a socially distanced cup of coffee.
You're
okay. We did it last time. I think we were there. But success. I want to wish you and all the teachers and educators out there who are listening great success. And I think Emerson expresses this in these words: success. To laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics, and to endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, a redeemed social condition, to know that even one life is breathed easier because you have lived. This is to have succeeded. And many years ago, I shared that with my mom, and she said, Tim, this is also to have been a teacher. So just being a teacher, wishing you great success. Can we do any more important work than the children in our world or in our country?
Well, I want to thank you for a successful interview, and you are one of the most successful educators that I know.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank
Tim, and hope to see you soon.
Same here. Probably about a month.
Zoom wave. Bye.
All right.
Zoom wave.
Thanks, Sam.